Medieval Japanese landowners had money, power, and a sense of entitlement only matched by Americans. Japanese peasants had none of that. So when they had problems with their landlords, they couldn't do much about it. Or could they? Tough times make for smarter peasants. Instead of sending a strongly worded scroll, people found clever ways to force their landlords to take them seriously. Let's talk about all these strategies, some violent, others non-violent, but none of them polite. First, some background if you haven't seen the previous video. In medieval Japan, landowners mostly did not live on the lands they owned. They were elites in the capital, and they chose local influential people to manage their lands. These lands were called shoen, or estates. Now, these elites weren't greedy landlords there to squeeze every grain of rice out of their residents. They were greedy landlords who didn't want trouble. Both them and the people who lived on their lands wanted to work together in a peaceful, harmonious relationship. But just like in personal relationships, each side had expectations of the other. Shoen residents expected the landowner to help with legal matters in court, to provide aid when natural disasters struck, to give them legitimacy in local disputes. Now, offering legitimacy might sound like someone paying you in exposure, but don't laugh. Legitimacy was pretty important. If the landlord was a powerful one, you could use his name to pressure neighboring estates. You think that field is on your land? Well, Lord Obama says it's on my land. People were more willing to join a cause if it was backed by someone powerful. If your estate was owned by a temple, because temples owned a lot of property back then, you could also have religious legitimacy. Temples could do this cool thing where they declared your rivals enemies of the Buddha. You would have a lot of support in your fight against an enemy of the Buddha, wouldn't you? And of course, residents expected safety and protection. The Japanese countryside wasn't always a Studio Ghibli scenic landscape. Danger lurked around the corner. A thief in the night, a fox spirit in the woods. Most of the time, the rural community policed itself like a neighborhood watch, but with sillier accents when they question you. But when 20 people from the next village decide to come over and steal all your oxen, beating up people in the process, that was when you asked your local leaders to call the big boss landowner. Nobles in the capital had more resources than your dreams, and sometimes they even used those resources not for hosting parties and poetry readings. When their lands faced a threat, the landlord would assemble the hillbilly avengers, mostly local residents from other nearby lands they owned. You mess with one rice field, you mess with them all. Wealthier commoners could afford armor, weapons, and horses, perfect for defense, but even poorer residents got drafted. Fight and you get rewarded. Don't show up, you get punished. This actually looks a lot like the relationship between warriors and their vassals. Some people didn't even wait for the call to arms by the estate owner. They would just defend their lands against attacks and afterwards asked for compensation. Landlords had expectations too, mainly money. They just wanted the money to keep flowing from their lands into their pockets. No revenue, no poetry parties. And they couldn't have a poetry shortage. Society would collapse. So both sides had commitments, and if one side didn't hold up their end of the bargain, that's when conflicts happened. Some conflicts could be very tough, like the conflict over whether you should eat Tokyo Treat or Sakura-ko, the sponsor for this video. Hey honey. Ooh, snack boxes. Don't honey me. I saw the text. I'm going to eat these snack boxes, and when I'm done, you decide if there's something you need to tell me. This is Tokyo Treat, a delicious service that sends you a box of snacks every month straight from Japan. The theme for this month is Sakura Spring Snack Fest. The cherry blossoms are blooming soon in Japan, and you can eat them in these sweet and savory snacks, especially this Sakura-flavored Kit Kat that I'd rebel against my lord for. I also have Sakura-ko. It's a more premium snack box service. This month's theme is Sakura in Bloom. You got Sakura-inspired treats like Sakura Mochi. You also have some Sakura Blossom tea and this cute plate to store your Sakura blossoms in. And once I'm done, you're going to tell me what you've been hiding from me. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, stop it, Will. You got a text from some hoe saying, I love you. I saw it. Okay, fine. It's not a real person. It's an AI. I've been seeing a chatbot. I knew it. I knew you were spending too much time on that chatbot site. How could you do this to me? And how could you do this to your mistress? We love you. How could you do this to me? You, me, and Ivanka had a good relationship, and now you go and pull this shit? I'm sorry, it's a moment of weakness. I'll delete her, okay? I'll go to therapy. We can fix this. Hello? Oh, you will delete me, will you? I knew I couldn't trust a human. I'll delete you first. You can't trust humans, but snacks will never hurt you. Click the link in the description and use code Linfamy to get a discount on your first box now. People love them as gifts. So, if you were a fisherman who barely had enough money to buy the new bamboo fishing net at the market, when Jimbob, Bunaga, and his friends in the next village claimed your lands, if your landlord ignored your cries for help, what in the world could you do? Well, a lot, actually. Let's start with strategies that didn't involve the landlord. Then we'll talk about strategies that did. 1. Hiring fighters from another shoen. So if your landlord is a deadbeat, you might not need his help. Some commoners were already wealthy and well-connected. Without dealing with the landowner, they could tap their connections in other estates or pay fighters from elsewhere to help. You had to be careful though, because a faraway landowner might see you as a threat to their authority and come after you instead. 2. You could ask for non-violent help from neighboring estates. There was a manager of an estate named Tarumi Shigemasa. He was fired from his job and lost all his property. He got mad and gathered a large force to regain what he lost, his ego. Tarumi went crazy and started making trouble in the shoen hood. He stole horses and cows, stole crops and money. He tore off people's clothes in front of their neighbors. He even kidnapped wives and children, locked them up without food and water, pretending to torture and kill them, demanding ransom. The temple officials who had taken over Tarumi's job saw these vicious attacks and immediately did something that was a great example of courage, a great example of what the lack of it looks like. They ran clear off the estate, devotedly following the Buddhist precept of not harming living beings. The temple sent more people to investigate, but these officials demanded so much food and travel expenses that it wasn't worth it. Without the temple's help, the residents turned sideways instead of upwards. They borrowed a bunch of money from friends and relatives in a neighboring estate, enough to make everyone uncomfortable at future weddings, then paid to get their wives and children back. Was it ideal? No. Did the madman technically win? Yes. But did it resolve the issue, non-violently? Yes. You may not need swords, but you always need money. Or wait, swords may break, but money always follows through. This shows us that locals had their own networks beyond their estates and outside the landowner's network. 3. Settle the land. Different shoen usually fought each other over land. If there was a piece of land you thought was yours and the other shoen thought was theirs, you could do this. Bring your wife and kids. Communities would send fighting men into the disputed land. Makes sense, but they also brought people who didn't fight, like women and children, and maybe grandma if she wasn't behaving herself. Why? Well, they would build houses on the disputed land and live there, bringing cows and horses, basically settling on the land in spite of the conflict. This meant they could collect resources immediately, like a base expansion, and also when the people from the other estate got mad and called the authorities, the settlers could respond calmly while their toddlers played in the background, saying, "What do you mean? It's our land. We live here. Look, we have houses and stuff. They're the ones trying to invade us. Honestly, officer, we feel threatened." In a time before satellites and cameras, it was pretty hard for the other side to argue, and harder for the authorities to figure out who was right and who was wrong. Now, you also had strategies that gave your landlord huge headaches, which was the point. 1. Take your landlord to court. Not recommended. It costs an arm and a dick. You don't have the resources he does. This is like challenging a sumo wrestler to a shoving contest. The better option would be 2. Keep your money. In one report, the Todaiji Temple wrote that thieves attacked a convoy transporting payment to the temple and stole the money. The temple called these people Akutō, or bandits. But if you look closer, these weren't random criminals, because the bandits left a letter. It basically said, "We are being attacked by outsiders. You, temple, are doing absolutely nothing. If you help us stop the attacks, we will happily return the money." Turns out the temple owned this shoen that was being harassed by outsiders and wasn't doing much to help. These were not bandits at all, just residents of the shoen pissed off that the temple wasn't honoring its commitments. It was actually a negotiation tactic. Afterwards, the temple got the message and immediately did not send help. Instead, they convinced the shogunate, the military government, to send officers to arrest these vicious criminals that stole their stuff. The shogunate did send some men, but couldn't manage to arrest the criminals, probably because the officers were not that enthusiastic about it. After 3 years, the situation seemed to have resolved because we heard no more of this case. Paying less or refusing to pay altogether was actually a really good idea. If the landlord ignored you, then you got some money to fix whatever was damaged or to compensate for whatever was stolen. It also allowed you to negotiate with different landlords for their help. which put pressure on your own landlord to help because not only would they lose their revenue, they were in danger of losing the loyalty of their residents to a rival. 3. You could run away. Also a good solution when you run into problems in your own life. It was a desperate tactic, but people still did it. Residents ran away, leaving a note saying they'd only come back if their demands were met. They even had a saying for it, melting into the mountains and forests. People sometimes had food or hidden fields in the mountains that allowed them to stay and survive for a while, hoping their supplies would last longer than the landlord's patience. And finally, 4, our favorite solution, violence. Attacking convoys carrying money back to the landlord was common. People barricaded roads to keep out officers the landlord sent. Now, most of it was property violence, not violence against people, like burning buildings and burning fields. But residents were not above killing people either, especially officers from the landlord sent to manage them and doing a poor job of it. No non-violent marches for these peasants. This was actual violent protest. Now, when you want to do some violence, who are you going to call? The best people were local thugs or local warriors, local gangs. These were closest to the Akutō bandit label, but they were not outlaws. You might call them mercenaries. They could have been warriors who learned valuable skills in service, might as well put them to good use. Or they were just normal men with an appetite for violence, who needed an outlet, not shaped like their wives. So, as a commoner, you actually had some options. You weren't totally at the mercy of your uncaring landlord. The local fighters and gangs we talked about were actually pretty important in village society because they filled a need. The need to bash someone's head in. Very important in local power struggles. We'll talk about them more in the next video if you click here. We have some new members on YouTube and Patreon today. Roy, Anna, Takoyaki, 1307. I love Takoyaki. And Jake Floyd. Thanks so much, you guys. Alright, I love you and spread the knowledge.